You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Shemesh Israel, 5781, 2021. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayigash. Our Parsha starts off with a cataclysmic confrontation between Yehuda and Yosef over the status and future of Binyamin, whether he'll be left as a slave in Egypt or whether he'll be returned home to his father, to Yaakov Avinu, to Jacob. And the first piece in the Midrash, as you may have noticed, we've been looking at the first pieces. The first piece in the Midrash tells us, I have to say, a very almost astonishing thing. And if you've been listening to me for a while, so you're going to see that, there's been perhaps a small shift in what I've been speaking about and my approach. I don't know if anyone has noticed it, but there's been a small shift. And this shift, I feel like, is very much embodied in the Midrash right here. And I'm open to your thoughts on this as well. I'd like to have some feedback. arigoldwag@gmail.com on the issue that I'm going to bring up. Okay, and here it is. Vayigash Yehuda vayemer bi Adoni. Yehuda steps up to Yosef and he says to him, "Please, my master, Yudaber no avdecha davar b'oznei Adoni. Let your servant say a word in the ears of my master. And let you not become angry with your servant, because you are like Paro." Now the Brisa brings the pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk in Mishlei says like this: "Bini imaravta l'reyecha v'goymer." Pasuk, it's in the 6th chapter of Mishlei, verses 1 through 3. First pasuk speaks about an arev, a person who has decided that he's going to be a guarantor. Okay, so already we start to know that we're talking about Yehuda, as a guarantor. But the pasuk speaks of the guarantor not in such a positive way. And we're going to see the first part of the Midrash says that the 3 things mentioned in this verse are actually not such good things. Not a good idea to get involved. Being a guarantor is a big responsibility. It's a great commitment. Nakashta ben Reficha, the second verse speaks of somebody who is using his speech, using his words in a certain way. Nakashta can mean to knock on a door. You banged with the words of your mouth. Asay Zeis, says the verse, that if a person has done these things, so then you're going to have to do something to rectify the situation, because when you make a commitment, when you knock, when you say hard words, so those words have to be backed up by action. So the Midrash first starts off, before touching on Yehuda himself, the Midrash tells us to watch out for these kinds of things. Watch out for commitments. You may have heard from me many times, because I know I've spoken about it, because it's something that I feel passionately about. The importance of a commitment. The importance of deciding I'm going to do something, making it so important. As my Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Brown of Yeshiva for Rockaway, as he said, I once heard him speak on Purim, people asked him, how did he become such a great Torah scholar? How did he become such a tremendous Talmid Chacham? And he said, you have to feel like your life depends on it. If you want to know Torah, you have to feel like your life depends on it. So in a certain sense, when we make a commitment, we have to feel like our life depends on it. And then that commitment is real to us. To the extent that it's real to us, to that extent it's going to be fulfilled. We have to fulfill it because it's so real to us. That's how important the Torah has to be to us, as Rabbi Brown said. And that's how important our commitments need to be to us. We see certainly that was the case with Yehuda. Yehuda made a commitment to his father. He promised him. He bet his life on it, his life in this world and the next. And to the degree that a person is committed, so it has an amazing result. Rabbi Chanina. But this is what the Midrash warns us about. Just be careful about it. Be careful. Rach min shalish v'davi b'shalish. Run away, distance yourself from 3 things, and attach yourself to 3 other things. Brach min ha'pikdainos, u'min ha'mei unim, Umilasas arevus ben adam lechaveroi. Even though, of course, it's a chesed, somebody brings you something to watch, gives you money to take care of. It's a responsibility. It's called a pikadon. Someone brings you something to watch, money to watch, etc. Watch out. Don't be so quick to be somebody who's taking care of other people's items. Second item is Unim. There's a concept in Jewish law that if a father has died, so the mother and the brother are able to marry off their daughter. In those times, people would get married even under the age of 12. And when it comes to the age of 12, even though she's been married, they've acted as husband and wife, the daughter has a right to back out of the marriage if she decides that she doesn't want this husband. It's called miyun, because they weren't married midoraisa, so midirabanan, there's such a concept. But distance yourself from this kind of situation. You make a commitment, and it might be broken. Stay away from that kind of situation. And the third situation that it says is being an ariv, being a guarantor, making commitments at that level. Being an ariv means backing up a loan. Sometimes a person needs that. It's a big chesed. But it shouldn't be something that we're running to do, because it's a big responsibility. If the person defaults, we have to pick up the slack. So these are the three things that the Midrash says, watch out for them. Watch out for them. Hidavik, says the Midrash, what should a person try to attach oneself to? To things that involve loosening commitments. Interesting. First of all, hidavik b'chalitza. Chalitza is where there's an obligation from midoraisa for if a person dies, a man dies without any children, so his brother is obligated to marry his wife, and it has a tremendous spiritual significance. By doing so, the brother marrying this woman will bring back down the soul of the first brother who died to be able to come back to this world. It's a very deep spiritual concept. But the Midrash says, hidavik b'chalitza. Don't get involved in that kind of situation. Be the one who doesn't marry the brother's wife. Ubahafaras nedarim, be involved in nullifying. If you're a rabbi who knows how to nullify a vow, be involved in letting a person out of their commitment. And the third item, which according to some of the Meforshim, it's not a separate thing, but the idea of really the first two things, and we can draw a general principle to all other things, is that one should be involved in bringing about peace between people. Because when a person makes a guarantee, when a person makes a promise, when a person is committed, for example, this is what the Meforshim talking about with the pikadon, somebody leaves their item with me to watch. So it opens up the possibility that it will be stolen, that there will be some kind of issue, that I might be tempted to use it in a way that's not permitted. It could lead to a fight. It could lead to a problem. It can lead to arguments between people. The Midrash tells us the most important thing, according to this verse in Mishlei, Proverbs, written by King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, is to steer away from situations that could involve a lack of shalom shebein adam lachaver, a lack of peace between man and his fellow. So the first section of this Midrash clearly says one should steer away from commitments. Perhaps we could say commitments that involve other people, but maybe even commitments inside of ourselves. Maybe it's not such a good thing, it sounds like, from the Midrash, especially if it's going to be something, that's what the mashmos is from the Meforshim, it's going to be something that we're not going to be able to keep our commitment, or there's going to come out some negative kind of interaction between people because of that commitment that was originally made. Steer away. Focus on things that allow a person to have peace between himself, between others. Now the Midrash comes back. I'm just going to skip one line in the Midrash that's not so relevant to the topic. Davar acher, another explanation. B'niyim arav t'lereacha ze Yehuda. This that the verse said, speaking about an eravon, a guarantee, a guarantor. This is a reference to Yehuda. Yehuda stood as a guarantor for Binyamin. He said, I will guarantee him, I will bring him back. He promised his father. Takata lazar kapecha. The verse also there, that same verse refers to someone who makes a promise to a stranger. Makes a promise, Tkiyas Kaf, is you take your hand and you make a vow with your hand. Maybe a promise like this, maybe it's different ways of doing it. But this is Miyadi Tivakshenu. This is what Yehuda said. From my hand, he made a solemn oath with his hand up. He said, you will get back your son. I will bring him back. From my hand, you will request him. Nakashta ben Reficha, the second part of the verse is that you knocked with the words of your lips. Yehuda said, with the words of his lip, he said, I promise you, I will bring him back. You will be able to, if anything happens, if I don't bring him back to you, I'm the guarantor that it will be done. He will be brought back. What was the result? So we know, in the simple understanding, and this is, perhaps I don't remember if I've said this in the past, but it could very well be I've said it in the past. You see the power of a promise. You see the power of a commitment. The power of the commitment is, Yehuda made a commitment. He stood up to Yosef, to this Egyptian ruler who was challenging him and going to cause him not to be able to bring back his brother. Because of that commitment, he stood up against this terrifying situation. So that's looking at it in a positive light, and I know I've said this, that Binyamin and Yehuda were forever bound as a result of that, right? Today, the entire Jewish people consists of the Jews who lived in the southern kingdom of Israel, Yehuda and Binyamin, Judah and Benjamin. We all, today, all the Jewish people, we're called Jews, we're from Judah, right? All of us are either from Yehuda or Binyamin. Mordechai HaTzadik was Ish Yemini, was from Binyamin. So this promise, this guarantee, was something that stood for 3,300 years, even more, 3,700 years. So this is an incredibly powerful thing, this promise, but it comes with a danger, and that's the end of the Midrash. He says, do this in order to save yourself. And as the Eitz Yosef explains, there's a toichachas musar. There's an awareness that we need to have that when a person makes a commitment, there are ramifications for that commitment. The commitment involves, for Yehuda, it meant that he would have to bow down to the malchus, to the kingship of Yosef. Yosef would show his power over the brothers, and Yehuda would bow Molei Kan Moshe, all the way down on the floor in deference to Yosef HaTzadik, to Yosef's kingship, to Yosef's demand, because of his promise. Vayigash, I love Yehuda. As the verse says, that Yehuda approached him, and this approach was one of complete subservience, of complete surrender to Yosef. Okay, so that's the Midrash. Now, I was learning this Midrash with my son, Moshe Dov, and we had a whole discussion. I asked him, it sounds like if we read the entire Midrash as really one concept, because you could really look at it often in the Midrash. I like to explain how the Midrash, when it says a few different concepts, so it's really the same concept, that they line up, they parallel each other, just being often expressed in a different way. But sometimes that's not the case. Often the Meforshim on the Midrash say that these are different explanations, and they almost always point out that the verse that's being brought at the beginning, which is going to explain our verse, is first explained in another light. That's the way the Midrash speaks about it. Now, in thinking about this, so it sounds like it's a negative thing to make a commitment. So I said, did Yehuda do something wrong in making this commitment? Would he not have stood up for Binyamin? Would the brothers have just left Binyamin there if they hadn't had this commitment? I don't know if that's true. I'm not sure. You do see that they left Shimon. I said this to Moshe Dov. You do see that they left Shimon down in Egypt. They went back. They came back. But, as he pointed out, Lamaisa, they knew that they would have to come back with their brother Binyamin, and they would get back Shimon. That was the promise. It wasn't like they left him there indefinitely or forever. So, would they not have stood up for him? Was it maybe they would have. It's not clear. But what is clear in the first part of the Midrash is it's better not to make commitments that are going to lead to problems. In the second Midrash, was it a problem? So as Eitz Yosef explains it, there's a techachas musar. There's a lesson that we need to learn, that if a person makes a commitment, he's going to end up having to bow down. Now, that sounds like a negative thing, but perhaps it's not. And perhaps, and this is how my son explained it, and I think that there's a lot of truth to it, it could be explained that the first section of the Midrash is just saying, indeed, watch out for commitments. There are responsibilities, and there can come out takalis, there can come out negative results from these commitments, and you got to watch out for that. It's better to be undoing commitments, creating peace between people when that's called for. That's the first section of the Midrash. The second section of the Midrash is saying a different idea. It's saying that when a person makes a commitment, there's going to be a necessity, an absolute necessity, to bow down. There's going to be, if a person makes a commitment, let's say he wants to learn the Daf Yomi every day, right? He's going to wake up one morning and not feel like getting out of bed. He's going to have to subdue his Yetzer Hara. It's going to be hard. He's going to have to bow to his commitment. He's going to have to do things that are difficult. So it's not saying it as a negative thing per se, but it's saying just this is the reality of it. The reality of a commitment is that it will involve further surrender of one's Yetzer Hara, further submission to his commitment. That's the two ideas that are in this Midrash. And I was thinking about it, and I've mentioned a few times already over the last few weeks, but I continue to think about this idea of there are two reasons, there are two motivations that lead us to do anything in our lives. One is lo lishma, not for the right reasons. And of course, Chazal say, we're supposed to do things for the wrong reasons to begin with, because it will end up being, as long as we're focused on ultimately arriving there, we will end up doing it for the right reasons. But the wrong reasons can involve money, kavod, honor, prestige, you name it, taiva, desire. Those things motivate us, and they're powerful motivators. They're very strong motivators. Lishma is a very soft motivator. It's a very weak motivator in a certain sense. If, and this is the kicker, let us say, it's a weak motivator if we're overly accustomed to only having powerful motivators. There's so many powerful motivators in the world. Maybe, if I learn the daf, I get a certain sense of self-esteem. That's a very powerful thing. I'm part of a tremendous group of people learning the daf. That's amazing. But can I do it lishma? Can I become accustomed and accustom myself continuously to doing things that have not such a strong motivation? As I mentioned previously, will I only take out the garbage when it's overflowing and when there's a second bag hanging from the door? Or will I do it even when it's just perhaps a little bit below full? Well, it's a waste of garbage bags. How much does a garbage bag cost? Right? Can I be willing to do it? That's the shviras hamidus. This ability to reinforce within myself that willingness, the willingness to perform actions that don't have a big payoff. A commitment is a big payoff. A commitment is a big payoff and involves dangers. That's what this Midrash is saying. I'm not coming here to minimize the importance of commitments. They're essential. We make a commitment to our children. We make a commitment to our families. We make a commitment to our spouse. There are certain things that are expected that come along with our relationships. And those commitments are essential. But the thing that I see from this Midrash, and of course we see the things that we're looking for, and obviously I'm thinking about this a lot now. So this is what I see in this Midrash. The Midrash is telling us that there's a danger in the commitment, in that intense way of thinking and being. The danger is on the other side of it, where I don't end up keeping my commitment, or where I don't I don't end up doing what's right. The commitment can also lead to a danger unless I'm aware, as Yehuda was, that my commitment involves a tremendous, tremendous obligation to subdue myself, to subdue my will to the commitment, to God, to in this case, to Yosef. So that's the danger. But what I'm offering here is another possible path. I'm offering this idea, and I would love to hear back from you about this if you've had any experiences with it. And I know it's not something that has a great motivation to write an email. But I encourage you, perhaps this could be the avodah, to write an email to arigoldwag@gmail.com. Tell me your experience. What does it mean to do something without that powerful motivator? What does it mean to be willing to do it when it first starts to come up, that this is something that I should be doing? And as I've said already previously, and I'll be saying it again, the more that I listen to that, the more that I'm willing to do things that are quiet motivators, that's lishma, the less I need those powerful motivators to motivate me to do the things that I'm going to end up doing those things anyway. But can I do it now before it becomes so dachuf, such a pressure? Can I do it now? I think that in this Midrash there's an encouragement to recognize the dangers of being addicted to powerful motivators. And the importance, it calls it shalom. It says, Ubahavas shalom sheben adam lachavera, bringing peace between people. Right? Obviously, if people are going to break their commitments, so that's going to be problematic. It's going to create angst between people. But I'm saying it on another level. There's a certain peace that a person experiences when, instead of it always being this pressured motivation, there's instead a soft motivation. Listening to the soft voice. And to the extent that I can listen to that soft voice, that's where my conscience speaks. That's where Hashem's voice speaks to me. That's where when I start to listen there, I start to hear more the voice of my conscience. I reinforce my ability to indeed do things without that heavy motivation. So I want to bless you, and I ask you to bless me. That Hashem should help us to recognize the place, and it's important to know that we need both of them. The places where we are supposed to make those commitments, and we are indeed mechuyev, we're obligated to make those commitments. Hashem should help us to be able to make the commitments in the right places and to be able to keep those commitments, to be able to be subservient to what we know is right, to surrender to that which is right. Hashem should help us in that area. Hashem should also give us the wisdom to discern where it is that we can reinforce within ourselves the ability to do things without that powerful motivator, but to do it from a place of love, a place of lishma, a place of purity. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos. This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.